Welcome back to Worth the Effort Woodworking, where today we're going to talk about my favorite kind of tree to make a bowl out of. A big tree. So, let's remove my tailgate, sharpen up the saw blade, drag it out a little bit so I can cut off a cookie, and I'll explain to you why this is my favorite material. I don't have an overly fancy chainsaw. In fact, this is kind of one of the lower end class chainsaws. It's about 50 cc's. I do have a 20-inch bar on it, which it pushes it at that level. Y'all saw it bogging down a little bit. But even though the log was a lot bigger than that, I can safely cut this log with this bar. The key thing is, I want to avoid getting this part of the chain anywhere near cutting. It might be buried in the wood, but it's not cutting action. So, if I assume that I can only use 18 inches of that bar, I will come down, here's 18 inches. What you saw me do was I came over to the top and I cut in, and I cut around to cut my line. And then I could come in and cut here, and notice as you get farther down, you can go deeper and deeper until you get through the whole log without touching that top section, so you avoid any chance of any kind of kickback. It's the safest way to do it. Now, granted, if you can afford, $1,000, $2,000 saw, you can go through it. But I only paid about $150 for this one on the used market. So you can get by with what you have if you just do it smartly. So the next round I'm going to cut off 20 inches in. Remember, I said that my lathe can only handle 16 inches. That'll give me 2 inches on either side in case cracks start to develop before I can get to it. And right before I go to the lathe, I always bandsaw it out. And I have another video out there, from a tree to a bowl in one day, that talks all about that. But for right now, I'm just going to come in roughly 20 inches, make my mark, drag that much of the log off my bed, put a table right underneath it to catch it, and then chop it off and go from there. So now we get to start seeing what we get to work with. A huge expanse of raw material. But I'm still limited by my lathe. The maximum I can turn is 16 inches round on that lathe. But because you are starting with a larger log, you get more control. And that's the benefit I see using large wood versus the small wood that barely fit. If you don't want sapwood, you don't have to have sapwood. You can cut out the heartwood if you want. You can actually make your rough lengths thinner, because as the wood dries, the grain isn't straightening out as much. It doesn't have as far to move because it was straighter to begin with. You just have so many more options when you start out with a very large tree. Now, to process this piece, I generally put it up on my table, and I will use the top of a trash can lid, which just so happens to be the perfect maximum outer diameter I can use on my lathe. This allows me to center the grain a lot easier. And I just mark the width and cut squares. Yeah, I don't cut it round with a chainsaw simply because it
it doesn't save me any time because I'm going to use a bandsaw. Now look at my chainsawing technique. Watch those shavings. As I start out, they're nice little squares because technically I'm cutting against the grain. But the closer you get to horizontal or even positive, all of a sudden you start going with the grain. And then any of y'all hand tool users know it's a lot easier to get those nice shavings going with the grain. The problem is that these little 50cc saws are designed for cross-cutting or going against the grain to get those nice little chips. And the long shavings can't clog it up. So that is something you need to watch out for. It doesn't seem to be a problem on the bigger saws. Now you've been watching me use what I call my chainsaw workbench quite extensively because being able to saw at this height really does save your back. And those two boards on the end allow me to cross-cut round logs and keep the logs stably, and they also measure out 20 inches, which is the most common size I use. This thing's just made of glue lamb. I've left it outside. It just takes abuse. I've had it for about 7 years, and this is a consumable device to me.
So some of y'all might notice a new change of clothes. Yes, this is the next day because my personal chainsaw kind of crapped out on me, so I went and borrowed one from a family member. But the reason why, whenever you get these kind of opportunities, you have to jump quick and process them all in one day is because you can already see there's a little bit of surface cracking going on because I had to stop in the middle of the day just overnight, especially with something like this, which is pecan. So you want to get it done as fast as possible. Now this is just a little bit, so I'm not going to worry about it because I did make it wider than I needed to. So we have the pith right here, and I can't really use that one. So what I'm going to do is make a saw cut right there and right there, getting rid of that pith. Now you notice I have a pretty deep section right here. Deep bowls don't sell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out about 6 inches, because that's about as deep as I find ever sell, really 4 to 5 inches, and that'll leave me a little bit of a tenon. I'm going to cut that off. That'll give me a nice blank for some natural edge platters, which will look really cool. I'll do the same thing on this side. 6 inches, and we'll get a very nice natural edge blank, plus the fact it gets rid of the bark, which holds in some water. So these will be my 2 money bowls. I'll have some nice natural edge stuff, and then over here I might save these 2 sections to do something with later on.
Now this particular tree is a pecan tree, very common in Texas. In fact, it's our state tree of Texas. They are all over the place. And pecan seems to have more variations in color depending upon where it grew up than just about any species I know. This particular tree is very creamy, and I kind of like that. It's one of my preferred ones because it allows me as a turner to get the best appreciation for the design. Normally when you have a highly spalted or highly figured, or the heartwood is a lot darker than the sapwood, the audience or the customer will notice the grain and say, oh, that's a beautiful piece of wood. But when I have these kind of virgin, no blemish, perfect slabs, the design, the shape, the figure, all that kind of stuff comes through, and all my work seems to be appreciated a little bit more. I will say this though, it isn't as valuable. Now the rest of the work is just kind of rinse and repeat. Throw the rope over it, slide it out a little bit with the table underneath it, chop it off, and section it up as you best see fit on that particular piece. And as you go along, you'll get those outside cuts, which once again make very nice natural edge stuff. And that's a lot thicker than you think it is. You could probably get 2 nice natural edge bowls out of it, plus maybe a platter if you didn't want to section it out. The bigger sections are going to be our large money bowls, and of those I'm going to core out 2, maybe even 3 bowls from the center so that I don't waste that turning it into shavings. You can get a lot more stuff. Then the center sections, that quarter sawn stuff, that makes excellent vase materials, or set it aside for drying for several years. You can make nice end grain boxes, or a lot of times I just cut them in half and make my $20 bowls, and that's a video I have out there. Now, by my best guesstimate, you're looking at about 30 bowls, maybe 4 to 8 platters, a bunch of hollow forms, and maybe some vases in this stack of wood from that one, 6-foot free log.
Old man grunt. Well, as you can see, I got the parts of the tree that I really wanted. The good stuff, the high quality stuff. I'm going to be able to get 2-3 bowls out of some of these larger blanks, and some of the offcuts, what would have been scrap in the long term, I can now get my $20 bowls, and if you've seen that video. If you want to see my process from this point forward, I suggest you check out my From a Tree to a Bowl in a Day video from about a year ago. From this point, I will be coating the end grain on one side with house paint, wait for it to dry, flip it over, coat the other side. I do that one because it slows down the drying process just a tad bit. I will tell you this though, the more I do this, the less and less I like using oil and latex paints for this surface. It just doesn't do as good a job as Anchor Seal. And Anchor Seal isn't that much more money. But I'm going to be using up these paint cans, and that will give me roughly a week, maybe 2 at the tops, to process all these rough blanks out of this stock. But if you notice, this stuff as is already cracking just in the time I cut it. So I want to seal it up a little bit to get it sold. After I rough out the blanks, I will coat it with Anchor Seal because that will prevent a lot of those bowls from cracking on me. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Logs like that are available. I got this one from a tree service from a relative that it fell down. The tree service picked it up and they said I could have it for free. But I know a lot of tree services sell this kind of tree for about 20 bucks a ton. 20, 40 bucks. So a tree like that would have cost you maybe 40 bucks. Not that big a deal. They're just too big for the tree services to process, so they end up just kind of taking them back and stacking them in the corner. But you do want to get one fairly fresh. But those kind of trees are out there, and I processed it with a little 50cc chainsaw. Granted, I went through two. My first one kind of crapped out on me. But it's not that big a chainsaw, and most of them are pretty durable. And a pickup truck. No big deal. Anybody can process this kind of tree. Well, I hope you learned something. Enjoyed yourself. Once again, if you want to see where I go from this, check out From a Tree to a Bowl in a Day video. And I want you to remember one last thing. It is always worth the effort to learn. Create a mess and share it with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.